week's episode of One Piece, the final battles of the Dressrosa arc are underway. The fighters of Kurita Coliseum fight desperately against Don Quixote's crime family, and Luffy and Law fight against the now-controlled Bellamy, the ooey-gooey Treble, and the dastardly Doflamingo. This week's episode can be summarized in 2 words: Red Hawk. The first half of the episode, while not the most exciting, is an amazing build-up to the explosive finale of this week's episode, where both Luffy and Law have just confronted Doflamingo and Treble, and Bellamy, who's constantly being beaten and turned into a puppet who is forced to fight against Luffy. Luffy, on the other hand, doesn't want to have to fight against his newfound friend, but it seems like he's going to have no choice. This scene right here just demonstrates why Doflamingo is so devilishly evil, especially the scene where he actually picks up Bellamy and uses him as a shield when Luffy accidentally kicks him in the face. He then gives him 2 pirate swords, which he uses to try and fillet Luffy, while all at the same time creating another string clone of himself for Law to fight against. While all of this is going on, the other members of Kurita Coliseum are all fighting against the Don Quixote family, and they all have some pretty cool things going on. I especially love how they keep building up the battle between Sai and Baby 5, because Baby 5 is clearly in love with Sai. She seems to have that weird quirk about her where she needs to be loved by someone, and she's feeling that a lot from him. There's also more of the battle between Lao Ji and Don Chinchao. I especially love the scene where they're getting ready to punch each other at the same time, and Lao Ji actually has to put on his glasses. And you get it? The G in glasses? Ho-ho! Cavendish was being a badass, and let's not forget Bartolomeo. I love the scene where Don Quixote's goons accidentally run into one of his barriers. He then punches the barrier, which explodes. And then you have Nico Robin, who summons these massive feet, which continuously stomp and destroy the ground. You have Kiro still fighting against Diamante, and you have Frankie and Senor Pink, who are constantly bitch-slapping each other in a contest to see who is the most badass and manly. I especially love the way they're hitting each other, because it's like a combination of slapping and punching where they're kind of just doing this left and right. It really adds a lot of humor to this week's episode. But the best reason to check out this week's episode of One Piece is for that final assault that Luffy has on Doflamingo. Both him and Law use their abilities in tandem, and there's a great scene where Luffy powers up, uses his Red Hawk ability, and then you have Law who uses his abilities to switch places with Doflamingo, and then Doflamingo ends up getting hit with a big Red Hawk at point-blank range, and it was satisfying as hell. This was all followed by Trafalgar Law literally cutting up Treble into a ton of pieces. This was a great way to end this week's episode. To be continued, screen. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of One Piece? That Red Hawk, man. That's what it was all about. That combination of their 2 abilities was so great, and it totally reminded me of reading and watching Naruto, because in that series, they always have characters who combine their abilities to create these amazing combo attacks, and they basically did that this week. Now, we've seen that in One Piece before, but that's just kind of the feeling I got from watching this episode, and just the satisfaction of actually seeing Doflamingo get hit by this attack. Something that is worth mentioning is that in this week's episode, the animation and the artwork was pretty good for the most part, especially on the artwork side of things. Whenever they were showing Luffy being really pissed off and getting pumped up to battle, he looked awesome. He looked so heroic and cool, and that's exactly what I love to see from the character. The entire thing with Bellamy is also just very disturbing and very upsetting, because eventually we all know that Luffy hopefully will be able to stop him, but who knows? Doflamingo could just cut the cord any minute and just kill Bellamy, just adding even more tension to this. We also get some small little flashbacks to Trafalgar Law's past. There's a few scenes where we get to see that Corazon was actually being executed by someone. Who is that someone? Well, if you pause those screens a little bit, you'll have a much better understanding, but just wait a couple episodes, we're going to get our full backstory on Trafalgar Law eventually. What I will say is, this week's episode was a massive build-up to the big final battles of this arc, and it did a really great job at doing that. I really thought this was going to be a total bummer episode at first, and they were just going to drag it out, but that final action sequence with the Red Hawk was beyond satisfying. It was so awesome finally getting to see Doflamingo get some massive damage put on him, especially from such an awesome technique from Luffy. And I also love this week's episode, which I'm going to give a 4 out of 5, a pretty classic episode of the series that any One Piece fan should definitely check out. Whether you're reading the manga version or you're watching the anime version, check out this episode. It was pretty badass. So I like this one a lot. But what about you guys? Did you watch this week's episode of One Piece? Did you have a favorite moment, favorite character who showed up, favorite action sequence? What did you think of that Red Hawk attack in Trafalgar Law using his special abilities to cut up Treble? And what do you want to see from the rest of the Dressrosa arc? Please tell me in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching my review. Make sure to like it, subscribe to the channel so that way you can see all of our latest anime and manga reviews. And Dragon Ball fans, get excited. The brand new Dragon Ball Super manga series has just begun. I just reviewed the very first manga chapter. The brand new anime starts next week, so let's get real hyped. If you want to check out my review of the very first manga chapter, I'll put a link for that at the very end of this video, so make sure to check it out. I'll also put a link for that in the description box. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.